And we're live. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 41 of the TechForge podcast. I am your host, Ned.
We're finally over 40. Over 40!
Yes, we are officially over the hill.
Yay!
Meh.
So I am joined by my ever-faithful co-hosts, Jason and Hunter. Hunter, thankfully, able to be with us this week because, nature is not trying to kill him and his this week.
Yeah.
Dude, you need to go to the pound and get a dog and name him Toto. I'm serious.
But then he'd fly away in a storm.
Wouldn't that be ironic?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that would be crazy. I'm glad nothing's happened to you, man. You need a t-shirt like I survived 2019, the year of the tornadoes.
Like the crazy thing is a city that's an hour above me had a tornado, and then downtown had a tornado, which is like 2 streets away from my house. It killed a barber shop, and now they have to rebuild.
Oh jeez.
Yeah.
I think it's your Protoss satellite dish you got in your backyard, man.
Probably.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it probably does not help.
Those Protoss, I tell you.
He should probably construct additional pylons just to be sure.
And some photon cannons and some warp gates. If I just had a warp gate, I'd just go in the warp gate and then warp somewhere else. As long as I put a prism, what's that thing called?
I don't remember.
It's a flying prism.
I know what you're talking about, but it's been way too long since I played StarCraft.
Yeah. The one unit I really miss that they didn't bring over in StarCraft 2 is the Dragoons.
The name just sounds cool, man. Dragoon.
Yeah, they were basically walking turrets. They had 4 legs, no head. Well, they had a head, but it wasn't like standing up. It was like kind of like a horse. Basically looked like a horse with a cannon on its back. Basically that.
That's funny.
Well, we do have quite a bit of tech news this week, so let's just hop right into it with what has to be the biggest and most important announcement, not just of this week, but of this year and possibly of this decade. Ladies and gentlemen, the Razer Toaster is now real.
The coolest looking toaster ever, dude.
So this is from Tweaktown. So some of you may remember about 3 years ago, I believe it was in 2016, Razer did an April Fool's joke with the Razer Toaster as their April Fool's joke. But the joke's actually much older than that. It goes all the way back to 2013 with the creation of the Facebook group Give Us the Razer Toaster, which came about when Razer CEO, and I'm going to butcher his name, so apologize, Min Liang Tan, asked the community about the possibilities of a Razer Toaster. And so they created the Facebook group kind of as a, give us the Razer Toaster. And so Razer kind of ran with that, and in April 2016, they did it as their April Fool's joke. Well, they joked about their Project Breadwinner, which was supposed to be the Razer Toaster. Of course, it was an April Fool's joke, but there was basically the CEO, Min Liang, said that if the Facebook group Give Us the Razer Toaster could get 1 million likes, then he would make the Razer Toaster real. Well, the group did make 1 million likes, and in addition to that, he made the stipulation that if anyone would get a Razer Toaster tattooed on themselves, that would count as 100,000 likes. And well, 12 people in the group did and showed it off in the group. So we have a link to the Tweaktown article we're looking at But basically what he said was, all right, I didn't think these guys were going to make it, but they did. It was to hit 1 million likes, and with each Razer Toaster tattoo being equivalent to 100,000 to 100K likes each, and they now have 12 Razer Toaster tattoos. I've just officially liked their page, and I'm going to put together my team of designers and engineers. It'll take us a few years, but I'll be sure to share the progress and make it a community affair. A Razer Toaster for Razer Toaster lovers by Razer Toaster lovers.
I really hope they come out with this, and I hope I remember to buy one because I would love to have one. As long as it looks like this.
Yes. Some of you, well, I'll go ahead and share this since some of you may not remember what the original Razer Toaster photo looked like.
That looks fantastic.
That was the Project Breadwinner photo from the April 2016 April Fool's event.
That looks fantastic.
Yeah. So the Razer Toaster is now real. Razer is getting to work on that as we speak. And so, like I said, most important, absolutely biggest announcement this week. We can all go home now. We're done.
Yeah, let's get to the hardware deals and let's get off here, man, because we just did the show.
Not really, but we do have some other tech news things. So let's see. Yes. So we've spoken about the last couple of weeks. There's been a lot of leaks about the upcoming PlayStation 5. Now, Sony leaked some of those in their interview with Wired when Wired interviewed the architect for the PS5. But there's been another leak. This is coming from notebookcheck.net, who is reporting on it based on some leaks they came across. But a new purported leak about the PlayStation 5 has offered up some more detailed information about the key components. In particular, they are claiming that it will be a 7-nanometer custom AMD Zen CPU with 8 cores and a clock rate of 3.2 gigahertz, a custom AMD Navi GPU at 1.8 gigahertz with 56 compute units and 12.9 teraflops of power. Now,
go ahead.
And that number is actually slightly down from the previous leak, which claimed 14 teraflops.
So I'm assuming that's around FP32 float performance. So to put that in perspective, the Vega 64, which at its base performance level, its theoretical teraflop estimated performance, or whatever you want to call it, is 12.58. And that's from the Tech PowerUp GPU database. And that's just a stock Vega 64. So that's 64 Vega compute units. Let's see, right around a boost clock of 1.5 gigahertz. So this at 56 compute units on an APU, that's, I'm assuming, between 65 and 95 watt TDP. So being in a console, they're gonna, cooling and power consumption are definitely things that they have to consider when they're tuning these parts for performance. So clock speeds and all that stuff. 1.8 gigahertz, dude. 56 compute units. Right, Ryzen or Radeon 7 is 60 compute units at slightly less clock speed base, like 1.7 gigahertz, I think is what it can boost up to. Stop.
Right.
Just stop. Take it out of the box, throw it in. That is insane.
Yeah.
Average PC user right now is probably around 5.
That's why I said take this with buckets of salt.
Yes. I'm very skeptical of this.
The CPU, that 8 cores, 3.2 gigahertz. Okay, that's believable
Yeah.
because that's roughly what equivalent to a Ryzen 7 1700 ish.
27 to 7, yeah, somewhere in there. I mean, you're gonna have probably you're gonna have all of the fun pluses that come with the Zen 2 architecture, right? 7
Right.
nanometer node, probably improvements in latencies and stuff like that, and a bunch of other stuff. But yeah, I could believe 3.2 gigahertz is on a 7 nanometer node. Absolutely. Because even if this was Zen Plus at that clock speed, you're around 60 to 65 watts anyway of TDP, estimated TDP.
One of the interesting things about this is it says a custom embedded SSD paired with an HDD. So I guess they're doing like a computer would be possibly OS on the SSD, and then games on the.
So one of the more popular theories about the data drive that's going to be paired with the PS5 is that it will be an SSHD.
Yes.
That makes
So
sense.
like a solid state, like
Fire
yeah, like a fire CUDA, exactly, something like that. And there's multiple vendors that provide solutions for that. So they would, I mean, you'd still get pretty good speeds, right?
Yeah.
At a cheap price.
As long as it's I don't know. I wonder. No, it would have to be the 2.5-inch edition then, or version then.
Well, that's what comes in the current PlayStation 4.
Yeah, it's just the RPM of that is 5400 of the regular Fire CUDA.
Right.
Right.
It's supposed to be if applications are installed like on a traditional SSHD for um, Fire CUDA for a computer, applications stored on it would be uh, increased by the 8 gig flash storage for rapid opening and closing, opening, closing. It would learn what you use the most and would open those faster. And then the files and everything would be probably on the 5400 RPM platter.
Hard to
Right.
say. Hard to say. Sony really likes to add a bunch of, as Red Gaming Tech likes to put it, lots of bits and bobs, right? So,
But with a
hard
console,
to say.
everything is games. Unless it's update. System updates, I can see that would be on the 5400 RPM if that's going to be it.
Well, not necessarily everything. I mean, so current consoles, one of their nice points is that you can install lots of apps. So you can turn them into a gaming device that offers lots of other media niceties like Netflix, Hulu, all that stuff.
Well, I mean, if this has a custom, I would assume that the games would go on the SSD part, and then the apps and the updates would go on the HDD part.
Who
That's what I'm
knows?
saying.
Who knows?
It
Maybe.
depends. If they're using like a traditional SSHD, which is basically the same as using a hard drive with an SSD cache,
Yeah, Optane.
then they could very much be like that. But if they're going for something like a fusion drive approach, like what Apple does, then
Yeah.
there's no telling how that could be put together.
Okay.
And it's Sony, right? Sony's got a history of over engineering their devices. So who knows what?
With
Who knows what
weird
it could be?
proprietary formats too.
Yeah.
I'd be interested to see. I'm really interested to see that. Of course, the APU, of course, but yeah.
Yeah, kind of the it used to be with Sony that their big thing was that they had to have the custom memory stick. You couldn't use any of the standard available
Oh,
SSD or SD cards or any of the other memory form. No, you had to have the special Sony memory stick format for your portable devices and for your PlayStation.
right.
And the PlayStation 4 was the first one to drop that and actually
Yeah.
use a standard format. Well, I guess technically the PlayStation 3 did have a 2.5-inch hard drive, but it was not designed to be user serviceable.
Well, I'm not much of a console fan, but I do have a PlayStation 4. And one of the things I do appreciate about it is the fact that they don't restrict the user from upgrading the hard drive in it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's kits to add either a 3.5-inch drive or you can just simply replace it with an SSD or anything that'll fit in a 2.5-inch form factor.
And now that 1 terabyte SSDs are getting down in price, especially the 512s are pretty cheap.
Yep.
Shoot, I'm sure a lot of people would. I mean, if they know about SSD advantage and stuff, then they would just take out the standard, because the standard drive in a PlayStation 4 is 5400 RPM.
Yeah.
And, I remember even back right after the PS4 originally came out, there were a number of comparisons where they took the PS4 and they cloned the drive to they took the standard hard drive and they cloned it to an SSHD and an SSD. And even with the SSHD, there was an immediate performance improvement. It basically cut the boot up time in half.
Yeah.
And then with an SSD, it improved it. It was like the original boot time was something on the order of 90 seconds.
Yeah.
Whereas with the SSHD, it was more like 45 to 50.
Wow.
And with SSD, it was something like 38.
That's crazy.
I saw a couple of those videos a long time ago.
Well, you could build a PlayStation 4 type console. All you need to do is go back to 2012, buy an Intel Atom, and then go to 2 years ago and put an RX 580 on it. Boom.
Or what you could do, and what some people have done, and what one person has done, is, well, he did it with an Xbox One, I think. He took everything out of the Xbox One case and put it into a PC case, and had the motherboard of the Xbox One on the front,
Mm-hmm.
and then had a actual PC motherboard and CPU and stuff on the back. So he had a console and a PC in one box.
That actually sounds kind of cool.
Yeah.
I hate to say it, but that actually does sound kind of cool.
That would be that would be something interesting that would be an interesting project. Let's just put it that way.
Did y'all hear about the it was the PS what was it? It was the PlayStation 4 Xbox One combo in a custom laptop style case.
What?
Yes, the PS box.
Yeah, the PS box 4.1 is what it was.
Mm-hmm.
A guy made I think it was like 3D printed a case with a monitor that he put in, and then it had like PlayStation on the left and then Xbox on the right, and he'd flip a switch on the back that could switch the monitor over to the other system when he wants to play it. Both sides had its own DVD drive for the games.
I remember seeing something about that.
It was $1,500.
What?
It's very amazing what that guy did with that.
I mean, I remember the days when Ben Heck made his Xbox 360 book, and then later the PS3 book.
Yeah.
Into custom laptops, and so I think that was part of the inspiration for it.
Yeah.
Of course, Ben Heckendorn has unfortunately retired and left Element 14 to in other capable hands. But you know, I do miss the Ben Heck show from time to time.
I don't know if I've ever seen that show, to be honest.
That's pretty good.
It's worth it to go
Is it-
back and watch some of the archives.
I used to
Speaking
love
of
watching the screensavers and stuff. Go ahead.
speaking of hard drives, though, our next little bit of tech news. This is from Backblaze, and they publish this roughly every quarter or so. But whenever it comes up, we like to talk about it because hard drives, yes, SSDs generally offer far more performance, but let's face it, if you want to do bulk storage, it's hard to beat the price to performance for a hard drive. Yes, it's not going to be super fast, but you can buy roughly 4 terabytes of hard drive space for the same price you can get roughly a terabyte of SSD space. And so Backblaze, of course, is the company that offers backup solutions for customers that they will back up your data to their servers. And the way they're able to keep their prices so low is that they use consumer grade hard drives instead of enterprise grade hard drives. And so that's why their hard drive stats they publish every quarter are interesting for, well, enthusiasts like us.
Well, they buy such a volume that it should, I think, in theory, kind of reflect what we could see in real life, as far as trends and stuff like that. Now, with I'm assuming they're constantly on. It's not going to be a realistic use case as to how we would use them, but it probably kind of mirrors how they fail in real life. So,
Right. And essentially, this would be a torture test for a consumer drive, even though these are typically rather typical loads for an enterprise drive. For a consumer drive, though, this is a torture test, essentially. And so their hard drive failure rates gives us some very interesting data about how consumer grade hard drives perform. And so let me share this first chart that they share with everybody. So this is the Backblaze Q1 2019 hard drive failure rates chart. And they list all the drives that they currently have in their systems. And one thing to note is the smallest drives that they have in their storage pods, as they call them, is 4 terabyte drives. And these are older 4 terabyte drives. In particular, notice they have the Seagate ST4000 TM000. That model is discontinued. So these are older drives, but you can see they're slowly phasing out 4 terabyte drives. And you have the annualized failure rates for each of these drives. In particular, some trends that they note. For the 12 terabyte HGST drive here, the HUH721212 ALE600, they note that it has an annualized failure rate of 2.6%, but consider they only had 520 of the drives and they only had one drive fail in Q1 of 2019. So that may be slightly skewing those numbers. Nice. You'll notice that the drives they have the most of are the Seagate drives, and that they also have some of the highest failure percentages. However, if we scroll down a little further, we'll notice something else. they take a look at trends of quarterly hard drive annualized failure rates by manufacturer. And they compare two of the manufacturers, Seagate, which in their testing has traditionally had the highest rate of failure, against HGST, or what was formerly Hitachi, which has generally had the lowest rate of failure. And you'll notice the HGST drives have gotten progressively more reliable over time, but the Seagates have, on average, cut their failure rate in half. Notice it started close to 3% in Q2 of 2016 through finally dropping to under 1.5% in Q2 of 2018 before rising back up to just under 2% in Q1 of 2019. But you can see the linear trend there is overall their reliability has improved.
I was just taking a look on Newegg. You can get a 4 terabyte drive for $69 right now.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Last I looked, they were over 100.
Indeed.
And then you can make a backup drive by taking one of those and getting a enclosure for like $10.
Yeah, I've got an external USB C dock. It's a 2-port dock enclosure where you literally just drop the drive in, right? And it's $20, $30.
I've got one for a 2.5-inch drive. Actually, I guess I have two, but one of them has a sled part attached where I can just drop it in. The other is just like an adapter that wouldn't hold the drive to the adapter.
Oh, gotcha. I mean, USB-C is plenty fast, man.
Oh yeah.
I copied all my video files over to it, and I've just got a 1 terabyte, 2.5-inch drive in there right now, and it didn't take hardly any time at all.
Well, as long as you have a USB 3.0 port on your motherboard or case.
Yeah, well, Type
2.0.
Yeah, Type C. So yeah.
Another trend that they noted in their data is that by moving to larger drives, and this would seem kind of obvious, but it's still an interesting trend. By moving to larger drives, they were able to significantly increase their space while moving to fewer drives. And basically, you'll note that they only installed 7,691 drives in Q1 2019, but they removed 8,339 drives. So they actually removed more drives than they installed, but they wound up with 57,150 terabytes more space.
Well, they're moving to higher capacity drives. I assume they're sunsetting old ones like the 4 terabytes, and they're moving up to like, I don't know, 10, 14 maybe per drive or something.
10, 12, and 14 mostly.
Yeah.
I mean, again, that would seem obvious, but when you can replace 3 drives with a single drive with the same space, obviously, as you install new drives that have triple or sometimes even quadruple the amount of space of your old drives, you can do more with less.
Yep.
And they also show some lifetime failure rates for a given drive over the entire service that a given drive was being used by them. And it's here you see the slightly higher rates. For example, the ST4000DM's 000. I point out that drive because I've actually used that drive in the past. They wound up with a 2.74% annualized failure rate for that particular drive, which is the highest they have here, with the exception of the Western Digital 6 terabyte WD60 EFRX, but they use significantly fewer drives than they did for the Seagate model. And so smaller sample size could certainly skew that significantly. And so they make a few guesses. They're going to be migrating out the 4 terabyte drives, and they expect to have fewer than 15,000 of them by the end of the year, which means they're going to be decommissioning roughly 20,000 drives.
Wow.
They have installed a set of 20 terabyte drives for testing purposes.
Wow.
And they expect to go over 1 exabyte or 1,000 petabytes of available cloud storage by the end of the year. So, some interesting data for you to take a look at and maybe help you in your decisions of which hard drives you'd like to buy.
Sweet.
But maybe hard drives just aren't your speed. Maybe you just have to have capacity and speed at the same time. Well, Micron might have the SSD for you. This is from TechRadar. Micron's new 15 terabyte SSD is almost affordable.
Mm-hmm.
So, Micron just released their latest enterprise SSD, the 9300 Pro. It's currently on sale in Germany. It's not been made available to the United States yet, but it is planning to come here soon. It is a 15.36 terabyte drive, which is just slightly smaller than the largest hard drive currently on the market, which is Toshiba's 16 terabyte model. However, the cost of this SSD, does anyone want to take a guess how much it is selling for?
I'm looking at the article, so I'd be kind of cheating.
That's true, but if you guessed roughly $2,700, you're in the right ballpark.
That's $185 per terabyte. In a market where we're getting 1 terabyte SATA SSDs for around $100.
This is true, but do keep in mind this is an enterprise grade drive.
And it's vented. Look at the picture, man. That thing looks like it's on steroids. Look, it almost looks like it's got teeth. It looks mean, Ned.
It does.
It looks mean.
I'll share this with our viewers.
It looks like it wants to.
Looks like.
It looks like it wants to eat Hunter. I'm not Protoss. No.
So that's what the drive looks like. And, you know, yes, the price sounds insane.
Meh.
And outside of an enterprise context, it likely is. But consider that you're getting a drive that has almost as much storage as its hard drive spinning rust counterpart. And the thing is, it's not that much more expensive per gigabyte than the hard drive is. If you look up that 16 terabyte Toshiba hard drive,
Yeah.
Let's see.
Waiting.
So let's see. Oh, they don't have the price linked here. So to the Google we shall go.
Yeah. You're supposed to be the Encyclopedia Nedtastica.
Well,
I mean,
since it's listed like since Silicon Power's 1 terabyte SSD is under $95. If you do 95 times 16, or 95 times 15, it's $1,425.
So just about half. A little bit more than half.
Yeah.
60% roughly.
15 terabytes. That would be a games drive for a couple years.
So you can
95
buy 15 of the silicone powers, right?
Yep.
And you can duct tape them all together. Put them on top of each other. And you can daisy chain them to one little interface.
But you can't have a no, really all you got to do is buy a 20 SSD bay enclosure or 210 SSD bay enclosures and then connect them to your computer. One cable. It's just an enclosure.
You know what you should do? You should buy 15 gigs worth of 128 gig drives. 15 terabytes worth of 128 gig drives. Put them in some really ghetto looking enclosure, and then hook it up to your computer via a SATA cable. That's what you should do.
That sounds terrible. And yet I still want to try it.
It does sound oddly appealing.
So for comparison,
this
isn't the 16 terabyte drive, but Toshiba's MG07 drive, which is available in a 14 terabyte size, retails for around $440. So in comparison, this 15 terabyte Micron drive, which is an SSD and is in a 2.5-inch form factor, is going for roughly 6 times that price. So yes, there is a significant gulf in the prices, but that 14 terabyte hard disk drive isn't anywhere near as fast as the Micron SSD. They are claiming that since it uses a serially attached SCSI interface, it is capable of 3.5 gigabits per second.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me, 3.5 gigabytes per second. Critical difference.
Gigawatts.
So, if you just absolutely have to have all the storage and all the speed, if you've got $3,000 to lay down, you can buy it from Micron.
I want one. Not really.
I want one so that could be my game storage.
Somehow I don't think that's the best use case for that, but...
Hunter, that drive would die before you fill that thing up.
Yeah, that is true. There is a big failure rate for that.
That's crazy.
But hey, you might have a use for it because Valve this week announced a new VR headset, the Valve Index. This comes from a non-tech. Of course, Valve announced this headset, and you can actually find it on Steam. But I wanted to use this non-tech article instead because they talk about some of the technical specifications.
I saw this somewhere, and it actually looked interesting.
So, the Valve Index, a lot of people took a look at it and saw the $999 price tag and immediately said, nope.
Yep.
And that's fair. Because, let's face it, $999 at that price, you could build a PC for cheaper than that.
Yeah, especially in a market where you can get VR headsets for like $400.
But hear me out. There are some significant advantages to the Valve Index. In particular, they have equipped it with two LCD screens that have a 1440 by 1600 resolution per eye.
Mm-hmm.
So you're getting greater than 1440p per eye.
So to render that, you would have to have a 2080 Ti, though, right?
Well, the combined resolution is 2880 by 3200 at up to 120 hertz refresh, but is overclockable to 144 hertz.
That's insane.
It is pretty
And
crazy.
features a field of view of roughly 130 degrees.
So I'm assuming you need a 2080 Ti to power it.
Yeah, you're going to need something really high end.
So that's $1,300 in your video card alone.
Plus $1,000 for the headset. Plus the cost of the computer to run it.
Yeah, I'm assuming you want at least an. I would assume you would at least want a 9th Gen i7 or a heavily overclocked 8th Gen i7. You know, of course, if you're throwing around that kind of money, you're getting a 9900K.
Yeah.
So, because you don't want any, you want no reason to have a bottleneck at all.
Yep.
Pretty sweet system if you could afford it. 2080 Ti with an overclocked 9900K. I'd love to have one of those.
I will say I do like the controllers that they show for these. The new controllers definitely look like a step up from the HTC Vive controllers. I have an HTC Vive. It's good for what it does, but it is finicky. And the controllers are not always ergonomic. It looks like for this follow-up with the Index, they may have fixed some of that. Because in addition to the controls having buttons, having just trigger buttons, it also has an A and a B button and a joystick on each controller. In addition to a touch-sensitive pad.
Cool.
And so, if you have $999 to spend, you might want to take a look at the Valve Index. However, at that price point, I wonder if they're going to be liquidating them on Steam with a game kind of like they did the Steam Link for $20 a piece.
Yeah, wait for a Steam sale. Give it a year, wait for a Steam sale. Yeah, there you go. That's hilarious.
All right, and that brings us to the next section in our show notes. This is where we normally talk about the AMD news. And, of course, the big news for AMD this week is they celebrated their 50th anniversary this past Wednesday, May the 1st. So AMD was originally founded in 1969 as a Silicon Valley startup. And they've basically been working at being a leading competitor in the semiconductor industry ever since. We have a link down below in the description to the AMD at 50 page that AMD themselves put up. They have an interesting timeline that you can scroll through that can give you various pieces of information about events that have happened across the last 50 years of AMD.
Dude, this makes me feel old because I remember I'm looking on their timeline and they had the Guinness World Record breaking whatever. I remember when that happened because they were using a bulldozer or a pile driver to break that record.
Yeah, hard to believe that was almost 8 years ago.
It doesn't feel like 8 years ago, honestly. It doesn't seem, I mean, I'm not that far removed from an FX system, and it doesn't seem like that long ago when I had it. So, and I enjoyed that system very, very much. It makes me feel old, Ned.
Yeah. For those who are curious, that particular Guinness World Record attempt was where they managed to get the overclock to 8.429 gigahertz
Wow,
on an AMD FX 8350.
that's crazy.
Well, so that was an architecture that was designed from the ground up to get as high of a clock speed as possible. You know,
Right.
the interesting part of that though is they did that with 32 nanometer silicon.
Yep.
That's impressive.
So AMD, of course, is not resting on their laurels. It's been known for some time that AMD is planning to launch their new 7 nanometer stuff in the not too distant future, sometime in 2019. There's been a lot of debate about exactly when, and Ars Technica contributes to this a little more with their article, AMD to launch new 7 nanometer Navi GPU and Rome CPU in third quarter 2019. Let's see. This is Peter Bright writing for Ars Technica. He says, quote, in its earnings call, AMD offered a little more detail about the launch of its next generation processors built using the Zen 2 architecture and TSMC's 7 nanometer manufacturing process and new GPU architecture Navi, again built on 7 nanometer. Server-oriented EPYC branded chips, codenamed Rome, will be shipping to customers in the third quarter of this year, and so too will Navi-based video cards. Now, Q3 is not quite pinning down as solidly as we might like, but Q3 at least tells us it's going to be sometime between the end of June, July, and the end of September.
Yeah. I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, if they haven't announced Navi by mid-July, then it's going to be later. I don't know what to say.
Curiously, they didn't make mention of when Zen 2 would be released. But I'd have to think that if they have Rome ready to go, that Ryzen 3000 can't be that far behind.
Well, I would think that, or are you saying Radeon 3000? I would think that Ryzen 3000 will come first, and then the APUs might follow. The Navi based, the Navi and Zen 2 based APUs would follow that.
Sorry, not APUs, EPYC. The server chips.
Ah, okay.
So, again, we're basically playing the waiting game at this point when it comes to Ryzen 3000 and the Navi-based GPUs. But we at least have a window. Sometime between July and the end of September.
Yeah, we'll see what happens.
We do have some additional information. This is a rumor. It is from WCCF Tech, so treat that as you will. Again, perhaps, I don't know about buckets of salt, but maybe a little bit for this one. They're claiming that Ryzen 3000 CPUs are allegedly featuring 15% better IPC than previous generation, clocking up to 4.5 gigahertz. Additionally, there are rumors that the X570 chipset is rumored to have 40 PCIe lanes, but that there will be no support for third-gen Ryzens on A320 chipsets. And so,
can't say I'm surprised, but honestly, can't really say I'm too sad about that announcement either.
I mean, the A320 chipset was never really designed with high-end chips in mind.
Right.
It was designed as the entry level. here's you an AM4 socket motherboard with all the basic features you need for the low-end processor this is designed for.
Like, so they offered decent connectivity. You know, you had a decent number of USB ports, and you could connect lots of devices to it. I mean, you could put in any kind of video card you really wanted, but there's no tuning. There's no playing around with it. There's no overclocking.
And when you can get B450 and X470 boards for really not that much more money, it does seem kind of silly.
It does. I've always wondered what the A320 market was in the DIY space. I mean,
I'm assuming for people building office machines or for OEMs.
Yeah, for OEM, I get it, you know, but for DIY, I mean, you can get a pretty decent B450 for like $80, $90, like, or a base bargain bin, really crappy B450 for like 65 or 60. I don't know. You know, I'm not that bent out of shape. It's kind of meh.
Well, keep in mind, all of these were passed along to WCCF Tech from the Chinese tech portal Bilibili.
Billy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that the person who posted a tweet about that information?
No, Bilibili is a Chinese tech forum, basically. Although it's also technically a video streaming site.
Okay.
Apparently, the only reason I know that is I was watching Linus Tech Tips a while back, and apparently they managed to cross the 1 million subscriber threshold on Bilibili in China, which is much bigger there because, well, they can't access all of YouTube.
So I just had a very funny thought. It might be offensive to some. It is family friendly. So I wonder if the people that are crying about this, the fact that an A320 is not going to be compatible with Zen 2, are the same people, or is brought to you by the same people that say the GTX 1650 is a good value because it's $150 and it offers you as much performance at 75 watts as you can muster.
I mean,
I think that complaint and all of that crying comes from those people.
Well, you've heard it here first, folks.
That's
Jason
what I think. That's what I think. But it's a good value because it's $150 and it sits right in your 75-watt PCIe slot. Okay. It's a good deal. I don't care that RX 570 is cheaper and faster. It consumes more power.
So, according to the sources on Bilibili,
Yes.
the Ryzen 3000 processor samples that they were able to get their hands on, they talked with a number of motherboard manufacturers across, most of which are based in China or in Taiwan. And they have seen, according to their sources, samples received in Q1 of 2019 for Zen 2 CPUs, and that those CPUs were clocking around 4.5 gigahertz. And the Zen 2 parts featured roughly a 15% boost in terms of IPC versus their Zen Plus counterparts.
So to put that in context, some of the best Zen Plus silicone maxes out at 4.2. So they're getting samples at 4.5. So that feels to me like it's, we just kind of leisurely clocked it at 4.5. That's a pretty impressive clock speed. I don't care if it's a quad core or not. I mean, that's really impressive, dude.
Well, I mean, it wasn't that long ago that 4.5 gigahertz was the limit for even Intel CPUs.
Yeah, I had a 4690K that really struggled to even get close to 4.4. So, of course, that was on a Hyper 212, but still.
I was going to say I have a 2600, still have a 2600 that I typically run at 4.0 just for day-to-day use, although it doesn't see much use anymore. But the highest I was ever able to push it was 4.4, and that was not always entirely stable.
Well, that's extremely impressive considering it's what, a 3.5 base around there, 3.4.
Right.
That's extremely impressive, dude.
Yeah, I recently had to recalibrate that machine back down to 4.0 because, well, I was running a stability issue.
Yeah.
But it's fairly solid at 4.0 gigahertz, so I can't really complain.
So if they've received samples, that means that it's really for them to just plug the part in to chipset or to motherboards that they're engineering for these chipsets. So, that's impressive, honestly.
And they also mentioned that the Ryzen 3000 series features even better memory compatibility than the previous generations, which Ryzen 2000 fixed a lot of the memory compatibility issues from the original Ryzen release. But they're now saying that they were testing with DDR4 DIMM kits at 4000 megahertz plus.
Really? That's pretty scary. Can you imagine Infinity Fabric running that fast?
It would be interesting to say the least.
Yeah. That's impressive.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what's this bit in here about 40 PCIe 4.0 lanes?
So there is a rumor that the X570 chipset that is to be featured with the Ryzen 3000 series CPUs is supposed to be featuring some new features such as improvements to XFR and precision boost overdrive, but also that X570 is supposed to be featuring a 40 PCIe Gen 4 lane design. They call it... So the leaked datasheet, and this is reading from WCCF Tech's article, a leaked datasheet shows that the X570 PCH is classified in the enthusiast segment with 16 lanes dedicated to PCIe Gen 4 expansions, 8 USB 3.1 Gen 2, 4 USB 2.0, 3 SATA ports in a 4+4+4 configuration, and a x4 Gen 4 PCIe uplink port. Presumably likely used for NVMe SSDs.
That's crazy. So current X470, let me pull up mine. I want to say mine's around 20 to 24 3.0.
I believe that's correct.
Which basically reserves 16 for the PCI Express graphics slot and around 4 for an M.2. So I just pulled up the spec sheet for my motherboard here. I've got the X470 Gaming 7. I don't know if that matters, but I want to say it was 20 to 24. And that's plenty enough. Like, what is Threadripper? What's current Threadripper? 40? Is it 44?
44 or 48, if I remember correctly.
I mean, and that's a big selling point because, you know, there's valid use cases for people wanting that many PCI Express ports. So if they're looking at 40, I mean, current good desktop is 20 to 24. You know,
But remember, the word on the street is that the EPIC chips, which Threadripper 3000 is, or Threadripper 3 is likely to be based on, are featuring up to 64 lanes of PCIe 4.0.
Wow. Okay. I mean, well, why 40 though? That's just really intriguing to me. Why they would go that route. I mean, I'm not complaining. I'm interested in wondering why. Because it doesn't seem like 20 to 24 really limits that much for just normal or typical use cases. But I'm not running a ton of NVMe drives either. That's interesting.
Another interesting bit that WCCF Tech learned, again, remember, take with a grain of salt.
This is the bucket of salt episode, folks.
Yes, get all your sodium in today's episode.
Nom, nom, nom.
So it's believed the X570 launch will be in July alongside the 3rd gen Ryzen processors, but that the B550 chipset motherboards would likely hit shelves at least 2 months later in late Q3. Which is not terribly surprising. They did the same thing with Ryzen 2000, where the X series motherboards, the X470s launched first, and then the B450s came later. I don't think it was quite 2 months, but it was a good amount of time later.
Mm-hmm.
But, and this was the thing that caught my attention, motherboard manufacturers are said to be expecting 12 and 16 core parts and have designed their motherboards around this information. Which means we could be seeing some Ryzen 3000 12 and 16 core parts.
That's crazy.
Or maybe they're just designing around the 12 and 16 core parts because maybe that's what's coming in Ryzen 4000? Who knows?
Yeah.
No. I mean, they're going to be tying 570 to Zen 2 or Ryzen 3000. Ryzen 4000 will have whatever the next chipset is. So,
or whatever they decide to call it.
Yeah. So if they're saying that stuff, dude.
I just still look at the Ryzen 5 and I just can't. I know the core clocks are, I mean, not core clocks, but the core capacities are going up a level. It's just crazy to me to have the Ryzen 5 3600 as 8 core 16 thread.
Right?
It's just like it's at some point it's definitely going to be necessary in games, but just logically that just seems crazy to me.
Well, I think a lot of us are still trying to deal with the fact that we spent the greater part of a decade with the enthusiast CPUs being 4 cores, 8 threads.
Yeah, and then if you wanted more than that, you'd have to jump up to 6 core and spend $600 just to get the CPU.
And so I think we're still trying to, yes, technically we have had 2 years of 8 core 16 threads being the new normal for a high-end mainstream CPU.
And now you can get what was $600 maybe 3-4 years ago at $119, man.
Yeah.
The same performance, effectively. The same performance, if not actually better. So, because 2600 and 2600X is actually better than that. So
that reminds me I went poking around the other day. I have an older machine at my parents' house. It was my X79 rig. I had a Core i7 3820 and a GTX 770 in that machine.
Nice.
It was a very solid machine for its time. It served me well until I upgraded.
Yeah.
However, I decided to go poke around to see, okay, how much would it cost to upgrade that machine to something a little more current?
Okay.
I think what has happened, because I remember when I originally looked for a Core i7 4930K or 3930K, either one, they're going for roughly the same price right now. They were selling for $150. This was a little bit after the Ryzen 5 1600 came out.
Okay.
Do you know what those are selling for now?
No idea.
You can buy a 3930K for $65.
Seriously?
Yeah, on eBay.
That is a... What is that?
It is a 6-core, 12-thread CPU from 2012.
Yeah.
So Sandy Bridge.
Sandy Bridge EP.
Okay. So
And
base of 3.2 to 3.8. Okay. Probably overclock it to 4 to 4.2, I'm guessing.
more or less, I run my 3820 at 4 gigahertz. Of course, that's not a huge jump for it because its base was 3.6, but still, 4 gigahertz on what was supposed to be a locked chip was pretty good.
Wow. Well, clock for clock at 1600 is going to be faster.
Exactly, and that's my point, is you took a chip, the 3930K was, I think, an $800 chip in its day.
Doesn't surprise me at all. That's crazy. It's $65.
Yeah, you can find them pretty much all day long in the $65 to $80 range on eBay.
Wow. That's trippy.
I seriously considered buying it just to extend the life of that machine for, another couple of years. However, it's interesting to me that the 3960X and the 4960 and 4970X have not experienced that same kind of downgrade. Probably because, the X.
Yeah, probably.
But the 3930K and the 4930K were always the better value anyway. But because you were getting essentially the same thing, just at lower clocks.
Okay. So to kind of come back to what we were talking about, X470. So Ryzen CPUs have 20 PCIe 3.0 lanes. And I think the X470 chipset adds 4 extra.
Through the CPU.
Well, through the chipset.
Right.
So to give you extra connectivity, essentially. So 24 are all together, I think. So, wow. Basically doubling number of PCIe lanes.
Is Crossfire about to make a comeback?
I doubt it.
Oh, no.
I wish.
Honestly won't.
I wish there was a way to do that, but I honestly do.
Well, I mean, technically, DirectX 12 and Vulkan both feature what they call discrete multi-adapter, DMA, but ultimately the developer has to implement it, and developers don't do any more than they absolutely have to.
Right. And I mean, I'm not a computer scientist. Yes, I've been in software development for 12 years, or at least in those projects, but I have no idea the level of effort needed to optimize for Crossfire and SLI. I have no idea.
Well, I don't have a ton of experience in games programming, but I've done a little bit of work in OpenGL,
Okay.
and that for a single GPU is maddening enough as it is.
Is it? Okay.
And so I have all the respect in the world for people who are doing graphics programming in OpenGL or any of the other graphics libraries, because that can get crazy quick.
Well, probably. So, who published Doom? Was it id?
Technically, yes, id Software, but id Software is now owned by Bethesda. ZeniMax, technically. But
Well, that is probably the best optimized game out on the market right now.
and it
So,
can utilize either OpenGL or the Vulkan API.
yeah, and it does it really well. So, I wonder if anyone's taking optimization tips, it should be off of them.
Mhm.
Boy, did we segue.
Yes, we did. All right, one last piece of AMD news, and this is only kind of tangentially AMD news, but I thought it was a neat device. This is from Tom's Hardware, and this is AlphaCool launches the Eiswolf AIO cooler for the AMD Radeon 7. So basically what this is an all-in-one liquid cooler with quick disconnects that features a 240 millimeter radiator and pump and a custom water block GPU block for the Radeon 7. So, see.
Yeah, I can kind of speak to this a little bit.
Well, I will show the photo from Tom's Hardware.
So this is kind of a poor man's open loop. I mean, with the quick disconnects, they're awesome because you can add a CPU closed loop cooler to the GPU loop if you wanted to, or you could keep them independent of each other. I mean, they're not the best looking hoses in the world. However, the radiator and the block can be sold separately and put into an open loop that's either hard tube or soft tube. So the radiator and the block are exactly the same as what you can buy independently to put in an open loop. And both are of very good quality. Now, the GPU block that's pictured here, the only part of that is water cooled. It covers the GPU and the HBM memory. All of the other components are directly cooled by that big heatsink, and typically these come with a nice backplate too. And you'll get within the kit, you'll get what they call this thermal pads to cover all of the power circuitry. So the heatsink does a really good job of cooling the power components, even on a Radeon 7, because Vega can consume similar levels of power, probably more, because the Radeon 7 is actually, I think, slightly more power efficient than the liquid-cooled Vega 64, which is a monster. But this does a really good job, and they're not priced too high up, because typically to get a GPU block like this, you're spending 100 to 150 bucks, I want to say. And this is probably around 120, and you get an entire cooler out of it. It's not a bad deal.
Yeah, the current price is 189.95 euros, which translates to roughly $212 US.
That's a little more than I was expecting, actually, because when I was shopping around for these, I was seeing prices for the Vega variants for like between $110 and $120. So, well, but still, you're talking about a niche anyway.
Yeah, and it's for the Radeon 7. If you're running a Radeon 7 to begin with, 189 euros for a essentially 700 euro card is not that huge an expense.
It really isn't. I mean, most of these you can get on Aqua Tuning. Yeah, I mean, you're right. And you know what? If you did put that card underwater, you would get some significant cooling differences between that and the stock cooler.
Agreed.
So, like for example, if you undervolted Radeon 7, you're probably getting 60 degrees as a GPU temp. If you put it underwater, it probably goes down to 30, 35 probably, if not more.
Sounds like a worthy performance improvement to me. And so, moving on, there wasn't really a whole lot in the news this week about NVIDIA, unless you want to count the fact that Tesla decided to move away from using NVIDIA chips to their own special chip for their self-driving cars. But that's only tangential to NVIDIA.
Well, their own custom hardware is actually faster
Right.
for their uses. So they're making their own custom hardware for their own custom use cases.
Indeed. Speaking of custom hardware, that brings us to the Intel news. Now, I have a couple of leaks here. And of course, these are leaks. So again, bucket of salt time. But we talked a little bit last week about a potentially leaked roadmap for Intel processors all the way through 2022. And we had some suspicions about that roadmap, that it didn't quite look as legit as it should. And well, we've had some additional leaks that have happened since then. This comes from WCCF Tech, but they get it from a leak from the Tweakers forum. And this apparently comes from an internal roadmap from Dell concerning Intel's mobility lineup.
Okay.
So let me pull up this photo and share it. And so this supposedly comes from internally from Dell. And we can see that if we look down here in this area, notice Coffee Lake Refresh in the H series, which we're already starting to see moving out. We have Ice Lake U, which is a limited 10 nanometer series, which is supposed to be coming out this quarter in Q2. We have Comet Lake U, which is the low power 14 nanometer variant that's also coming out at the beginning of Q3. And it's not until Comet Lake H toward the very end of this year, in Q4 of 2019, that we see the successor to Coffee Lake, essentially. And you'll notice we don't see 10 nanometer, except in very limited low power cases, basically at all in this roadmap.
And this isn't the first of its type. I mean, there's been multiple leaks, and they're all saying a similar story, that that Intel is focusing more on getting 10 nanometer out to enterprise and mobile first, rather than desktop. I know I commented last week that I didn't believe it, but there's more and more leaks coming out from what appear to be pretty reliable sources, and I'm just surprised that they're not. I guess I'm surprised, but I'm not surprised, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because all indications are that AMD is coming out with 7 nanometer for the desktop space. This basically just says that, and Intel's kind of always been this way, where they're going to prioritize for enterprise and mobile first.
Well, it's where most of their profit margin comes from.
True, but you're also talking about whenever you hear of interviews from Intel, or you always, at least I get the feeling that they're a very prideful culture. So I'm surprised that they would uh, leave such an opportunity for their competitor in the desktop space. But they are.
Well, we know that their 14 nanometer process node has been taxed from just to keep up with demand for the last almost over a year now.
Mm-hmm.
And even with them downplaying it, they say that that shortage should be ending by Q3 of this year. But that's 3 to 6 months away.
Well, yeah, and you can also say, I mean, not only is it tasked from what appears to be a capacity or productivity standpoint, you could also make a case that it's probably taxed materially. Because when you look at the 9900K, that part, if left to the motherboard manufacturer's BIOS optimizations to where you're not limiting it to 95 watts, that will consume 140 to 180 watts, no problem. And it's a great performing part. That's the fastest mainstream part in the world. But when you've got a part that without overclocking is consuming 180 watts, that tells me you're at the limit of what you can do on that node. I'm not a computer scientist by any means, but all I can say is you want your consumer parts to be at the high end around 100 watts, for TDP. And even though the thing states 95, if you just slap it into a build and run some power tests, you're probably pushing 180 watts.
Yeah, once you have it overclocked to 5 gigahertz.
Maybe not even that. I mean, there's cases where you don't even overclock it, and it'll boost itself to whatever the boosting algorithm states right off the motherboard's BIOS. And I've seen cases where it is hitting over 180 watts or right around there. That's why a lot of those parts were at review were stating that they had to put a 360 mil AIO on it just to cool it, or an NHD 15.
Right.
Until they figured out that they had to limit it in the BIOS and all that stuff, and then it's reasonable. But still, I don't know, man. To me, that seems to tell a story that they're kind of at the limit of what they can do, and then you've got AMD coming out with 7 nanometer. 12 and 16 core parts that potentially will be at around 5 gigahertz.
Well, if the point needs further reinforcement, this comes from a separate article. It's also from WCCF Tech, but it's technically from the same set of leaks. But this is their desktop roadmap. So in particular, take note of the S series. That's what we consider to be the mainstream desktop series. The ones on the Z370, Z390 chipsets.
Okay.
So notice you have Coffee Lake S refresh, which that is what we're all familiar with as the 9th generation CPUs. Those launched toward the end of last year.
Mm-hmm.
But notice Comet Lake S. They are having a ramp up, according to them, in Q4 2019. And then notice it says Q1 20 for consumers, Q2 20 commercial, but it's still 14 nanometer.
Yeah, and they're talking 2021, and by that point, AMD's going to have. I mean, they've already stated or leaked at least, and it's believable if you look at what they've done with Ryzen first gen to Zen Plus, they're leaked to have an optimized 7 nanometer node that they're moving to, or potentially even smaller than that, by 2021. So I'm just really surprised. I don't see how Intel can compete with 7 nanometer at 14 plus plus plus. Let alone their, AMD moving to something even better. I just don't see how they can do it.
I would tend to agree, but apparently Intel either thinks they can or they don't have any other choice. And given how much trouble that 10 nanometer node has given them, it may just be a case of they don't have anything else yet. But on the other hand, I think we would be amiss to underestimate Intel.
You should never underestimate Intel. AMD made that mistake and they came out with the Core i series, or their Core 2 Duo, essentially. And the Core 2 Duo spanked them. Spanked them hard. And
by the time they came up with a CPU that could fight with the Core 2 Duo, at that point, Intel introduced the Core i series, and then Sandy Bridge happened, and the best that AMD had to fight it was Bulldozer in the FX series, which we all know how that went.
So when did Core 2 Duo come out? 2003?
Well, the original Core Solos and the Core Duos, those came out about 2003. The Core 2s were roughly 2006, I believe.
Okay. So,
Or at least, excuse me, the Core 2 Quad, the Q6600, that was such a legend, technically came out in 2005. So the Core 2 Duos came out before then.
So I want to say it was around 2003 when the Core 2 came out. That's really when Intel caught AMD by surprise. And it wasn't until 2017 when AMD really came out with something that competed with Intel again.
Yeah, the Quadro Core really threw AMD for a loop.
So 14 years it took AMD to recover and have something that was competitive, performance-wise. 14 years.
Yep.
You can't underestimate Intel.
That's
why
they have the money and the R&D to make whatever they want to make. But as we've seen, their problems with their 10 nanometer node, they can't buy their ways out of.
I know what I'm seeing here. I just can't help but feeling that there's something else in the works here. I can't believe this.
Well, that could certainly be the case. This next article is from Tech Power Up, and it's technically a couple weeks old, but it reinforces kind of the idea that maybe Intel has a different ace up their sleeve. And that is that Intel could potentially be courting Samsung to manufacture their Xe GPUs. for them in 2020.
Well, and this is a completely different division that Intel's standing up to.
Correct. But if they're getting Samsung to manufacture their Xe GPUs on the 5 nanometer EUV node, then why couldn't they perhaps subcontract, sublease, get a license for that for their CPUs, perhaps?
They could. They very easily could. They would just have to redesign their current architecture to fit that node. So whatever that entails, that probably would take a year, of a redesign. But they really wouldn't have to. I don't think they would have to really change much. They would just simply take the 14 nanometer architecture and shrink it down to 5 or 7, whatever that process is for Samsung, and whatever would be needed for that to do. I don't know what that is, but I can't see it taking more than a year for design work. And I mean, AMD was able to do it in a year by shrinking from 14 to 12, and then another year to completely redesign Zen to shrink it from 12 to 7. So,
well, part of this is sparked by the fact that there are, again, rumors that Raja Koduri, his GPU design for the Xe GPUs, would need to leverage higher transistor densities than 10 nanometer could cope with.
well, not to mention the competition ecosystem with GPUs is vastly different than that of CPUs. Because we know AMD's coming out with 7, and NVIDIA has been rumored to be moving to 7 here in the next year and a half. So to be competitive with that market ecosystem, they would have to have a node that's either competitive or slightly superior. And that would be 5 nanometer EUV.
And of course,
go ahead.
I was going to say, of course, Intel's Xe GPUs, they're going to have to feature all the latest and greatest technologies. So, of course, they announced at the FMX graphics show, this comes from Tom's Hardware, Intel Xe GPUs will feature hardware-accelerated ray tracing.
What is that? Is that the sexy thing to say? Is that like the super cool thing to say now?
Apparently, it's the in thing.
It's ray tracing. We're gonna have ray tracing. We're gonna have ray tracing in this one, and you're gonna have ray tracing in that one. I don't know what it means. It just sounds cool. I heard Ned was saying it yesterday. It just sounded so cool. And then Hunter was saying it.
Well, it's the next big thing.
I want it too.
Well, companies are always looking for the next big thing. And ray tracing, apparently, because of NVIDIA, RTX, is the next big thing. Now other companies want it because NVIDIA has it.
Well, yeah, because then you could put a $50 GPU out there, or you could take a GPU that costs $50 to make, put ray tracing on it, and then charge $800 for it. Yeah, let's do that.
Well, one of the critical things, we all know that when it comes to marketing the next big thing, there's always some gimmick out there. The past few years, up till about a year and a half ago, it was VR support. Support for VR. Which, don't get me wrong, VR is great if you can afford the hardware and if you've got the processing power to handle it.
Well, not exactly now with the Oculus Quest all-in-one system.
Well, yeah, but don't get me wrong. The Oculus Quest is a very interesting product from the standpoint that it is a fully independent product. But you got to keep in mind the thing's running basically a smartphone processor and graphics chip.
Yeah.
So it can't really compete with even like a 580 or a 590 pushing a VR headset?
I don't think so.
No, it's not really designed for that.
It's not going to have the best video graphics quality. It's going to be basically like an Android system in your face.
It's basically designed to be a competitor to Samsung's Galaxy VR.
Well, Gear VR.
Okay.
Or Gear VR, thank you.
Gear VR is. See, I don't like phone based. I mean, I don't like putting your phone in a headset and calling it VR. I don't think that that's technically VR. To me, that's not. Um, and I don't like that too. This is a rabbit hole. I don't like that because it'll um, heat up your phone to where it's too hot. They don't have fans in those when they first came out, and it only lasted for like an hour or less. I have one. I have a Gear VR. Well, I mean, I have a Gear VR. I didn't touch it because I don't agree with the. I can't agree with the. We own everything that you do in Gear VR.
Is that an
Yeah.
Apple product?
Yeah, well, that's basically like an app. Yeah, I mean, their terms of service is anything you do in Gear VR games and apps, we own it. So I'm like,
And
no.
we can use it for promotional purposes.
Oh
Yes.
my god.
I'm like, no, no, I can't do that. I'm too security minded for that. So I have it in a box over there, and I ain't touching it because I don't like that.
Hunter, my respect for you has just grown by a
And
factor of X.
it annoyed me because I got it. Well, I was supposed to get it for free with my Samsung S8, but there was a big mix up with. Apparently, I didn't get it because I ordered my phone through Verizon, and Verizon told me to order it through Samsung, so I ordered two phones, not realizing that big mix up. Not going to go into that, but it should have come with a Gear VR. So I bought my coworker's Gear VR because he had it. He didn't care about VR and didn't really understand it, I guess. And so I was like, yes, I'll buy it. And it was like $40, I think, when it normally would cost 150. Yeah. And then I read the terms of service. I'm like, no, I'm not committed to that.
I was gonna say I did play with Google Cardboard for a bit,
I mean,
and
it's not like I would do anything bad in VR space, but I don't want them to use like every if I like meet somebody in VR space and have a conversation with them, like getting to know them, and like just imagine like a personal conversation that you have with somebody, and of course, well, I mean, Google is listening to everything. Samsung is listening to everything. My
Mhm.
phone has recorded me. Like I had my phone sitting next to me, um, not even using it at work, and I looked through my phone just to see, like, I looked through the audio just to see if I had some um, songs on there. What are these recordings? It recorded my conversations at work without me even enabling the mic on it. I didn't touch my phone, and it recorded my audio.
Hunter, you should give props to your phone because your phone is a creeper.
Yeah, and recently I tried to restart it and it said nope. It didn't say nope, but it closed the restart window, which was twice yesterday. My roommate is calling me. I gotta go find out what's going on. I'll be right
okay.
back.
Okay.
Well, in the meantime, we can get started on the hardware deals.
Oh, sweet.
So this week I have the hardware deals sorted in price from lowest to highest. So we'll start with the cheapest deal. We don't normally discuss routers on this show a lot, but this was a pretty good deal. This is the Asus RT AC1200. Let me share it on the screen so that everybody can actually see it.
That's not a bad deal.
It is a dual band 2x2 router at AC 1200 speeds. It has 4 gigabit ports on the rear. It covers both 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz bands. It has 4 5 dBi antennas, 2 for each of the bands. And the price for the whole thing is $49.99.
Which, for those who have a 2.4 gigahertz AC router, this would be a huge upgrade because the 5 gigahertz frequency gives you a ton of bandwidth. It's not going to have the range of 2.4, but it's a huge upgrade in terms of bandwidth. Plus, a lot of routers that are dual channel like this or dual band will have separate SSIDs for the 2.4 and the 5 gigahertz bands anyway. So, yeah.
I know my router does. It has separate SSIDs for those. And the nice thing about this being an Asus router and being of the RT series is that if you don't trust Asus default firmware, this will run DDWRT or OpenWRT.
Nice. Which I've used that in the past. It's really good firmware.
So if you want to have a fully open firmware, install OpenWRT on this and you're good to go.
Yeah, it's insane the level of control you get. You can even overclock your CPU if I remember right.
With certain models, that's true. So if you need a cheap wireless router, this is a very good deal.
Yeah, and the AC is pretty good.
Yes, sir.
I mean, it's not the fastest wireless AC router, but AC 1200 is what I use in my apartment, and it is plenty fast.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, it's better than paying $250 for the newest gaming router.
Gaming.
And let's be honest. If you're gaming on Wi-Fi, you're doing it wrong.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I have to because.
Well, yeah, but you know what I mean. If you aren't forced to do it that way,
yeah.
Yeah,
I have
that's
to wait
one
until
thing.
I get my own house to do wired.
Power line adapters work. I'm just saying.
Really?
Oh, yeah, I got one here. It's fantastic.
Is that power line adapter?
Yeah. Yeah, I've got one end hooked up to a router, which is coming right off of the cable modem in the basement, which is a circuit or two away. And then up 2 floors, I've got the other end of the power line adapter, and I routinely get anywhere from 180 to 200 megabits per second at really low latency. I'll run the speed test right now to find out. And I've got a router connected. So I've got an AC router connected directly to the power line adapter here. And then I've got either Cat 5e or Cat 6 running directly from my gigabit port on the router into my computer. Let me do a speed test real quick.
Next deal.
well, so the next deal, we've talked about this a couple of times already tonight, but this is just an excellent deal. Now, yes, you can get the Ryzen 5 1600, which is the first gen version of this same CPU, for about $40 less. However, this is the latest generation, as of this recording, Ryzen 5 2600. It's currently on sale on Newegg for $164.99, but if you use the offer code here on screen, EMCTYWT23, you will get an additional $15 off this price, meaning you can get a 6-core, 12-thread CPU with a 3.4 gigahertz base clock, 3.9 gigahertz boost, which you can typically easily overclock to stay at that max boost setting all the time, for $150, and you get $140 worth of games with it.
Yeah.
So
Division 2 Gold Edition is $100. I know because that's the one I bought.
and then you get a copy of World War Z as well. So for $140 worth of games, you get a $150 CPU. Basically, that works out to you pay roughly $10 for the CPU.
That's crazy.
Yep.
So if you're looking for a solid CPU, this is a good option right now. And yes, technically it is $30 to $40 more than the 1600. Believe me, the improvements for the 2600 are worth it.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's the one I have.
And as being a person who's built multiple systems recently off of both Ryzen first gen and second, I can tell you for a fact that you can feel the difference. The as good as the Ryzen first gen parts are, and as good as those systems are, the Ryzen second gen parts in builds just feel snappier, and that does equate to measurable performance gains. I mean, it's not a huge margin, but it's noticeable and it's measurable. So.
All right. So next, our third hardware deal. This is the ASRock Phantom Gaming X Radeon RX 580 8GB version. This also comes with the same game deal as that AMD CPU, but this is a GPU. And it is an 8GB RX 580 for $169.99.
That's such a crazy good deal.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that part is so fast at 1080p, and for that price, that's just crazy.
Now here they value those same games at $120. I'm not sure why they value them differently here, but regardless, at this price point, you're almost getting this card for free when you include the free included games.
That's insane. That's insane.
If you were going to buy the Division 2 Gold Edition and World War Z, then getting these two free games with this GPU, it's effectively, they negate each other's cost.
And let's not forget, these two, I want to say, are AMD optimized titles.
That is correct.
And World War Z recently made some press because the Vega 64, stock Vega 64, mind you, was beating the 2080 Ti.
Yep.
Yes, it was.
Non-overclocked Vega 64 beating 2080 Ti. $400 part versus $1,300 part.
Wasn't those Vulkan games, Vulkan API?
I think it's even more than that. So, yeah, I think they are Vulkan, but they're also AMD optimized.
Yeah. So once Vulkan takes over, AMD Vega is going to be like unstoppable in a way.
Maybe. I mean, NVIDIA did include some design into their Turing architecture, which makes them a lot more Vulkan friendly than Pascal. One of that being asynchronous compute, which has been a GCN design for a very long time now. So, yeah, but still.
Speaking of Vega, this last deal is probably, I don't want to say it's the riskiest of them, but it is a refurb. And we all know with a refurbished product, you do take a little bit of additional risk. However, this is a refurbished PowerColor Radeon RX Vega 56, and yes, that is a reference cooler and a reference PCB for $229. So for the same price as an RX 590, you could step up to a Vega 56.
Which, if you were to compare this to NVIDIA, this is about the same level of performance as an RTX 2060, a $350 part with 2 gigabytes of less video memory. To get 20% extra performance on this part, all you have to do is flash the BIOS with a Vega 64 BIOS and do some overclocking.
Be aware that will increase your power draw, but not by a hugely insane amount, unless you make it that way.
Right, which you can. You can modify the registry power tables to go from a 50% max. I forget what they call that, offset, I guess, to a plus whatever. I mean, you can edit it to be whatever you want. Mine's currently at 140 watts, or like an extra 140%. If you want, I can include a screen capture of my video driver.
Right.
But
I remember Gamers Nexus took a Vega 64 and decided to see just how far they could push it. And, well, with some some modifications to the power tables, just kind of like what you did for your 56, they got a Vega 64 to pull 600 watts of power.
Well, and it was beating, or at least at around the same performance level as the RTX 2070, if I remember right.
In that particular test, yes.
So I'm gonna take a screen capture here, and I'm gonna put it in Facebook. If you want to pull that up, Ned.
Okay, just a second. Let me. Okay, just a second while I share that.
Okay.
There we go.
So that's what I'm talking about. So on any overclocking software like the EVGA or MSI Afterburner, now this is built directly into AMD's driver, but they all any video card tuning software will have a power slider, and with a registry table mod, which is extremely easy to set up and edit. This allows, so the on the reference driver, you've got a plus or minus power limit percentage of 50%. This just allows you to edit it to whatever you want. I just max it out. It's not going to hurt the card. The card will only consume the amount of power that it needs to stay at whatever parameters you set for it. So it won't hurt the card. And especially reference Vega PCBs, like that PowerColor card that's refurbished, have one of the biggest VRMs of any video card that's out there. Like, they're only slightly worse than the 2080 Ti. And the 2080 Ti consumes a lot more power than any Vega ever could dream of. So, yeah. That's an insanely good deal. On that particular one, what is it? It's sold and shipped by Newegg, and you also get warranty as well. So,
Yeah, it is technically a 90-day limited warranty, but it is a warranty.
Okay. Well, you could probably buy an extra warranty, I'm guessing, if you wanted.
Through Square Trade or the like.
Still, I mean, at that performance level, there's no other cards on the market right now that offer that amount of tunability. So you can easily get an extra 20 to 30% performance out of the card.
Indeed. Well, unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of our show for this week. If you've enjoyed the content you've seen here, of course, you can check us out here on CrossForge Gaming on YouTube. Check out any of our videos here on the channel. Of course, we'll always be here once a week with the TechForge podcast. You can also check us out over on twitch.tv/CrossForgeGaming, where we stream 5 nights a week, Monday through Friday, usually around 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central Time. Or you can also check us out on any of your favorite social media sites on Facebook, Twitter, and check out our Discord community, which is linked down below in the description. In the meantime, I've been Ned. This has been TechForge. And remember, when life has you down, Jesus loves you, and forge on.
Meow.
Forge on.
Meow.